do here is go back, 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 back.
Hey, everybody, what's up? It's a live show. Surprise. I didn't mention it on the episode prior, and that's because I didn't realize I was going to do a live show until a couple days after it was put in the can and released and everything. And yeah, so here we are. It's Thanksgiving Eve. A big shout out to everybody in the room at the moment. I know that usually we get to a critical mass at some point, so hopefully we'll get there. I'm going to keep the conversation going here. I'll highlight the chat as we go along. I think we've already got Dave's in the house. Hey, Dave, good evening to you as well. Mr. Connor from Land of Sunshine and Bunnies, Portland, Oregon. Hello, sir. And all the rest of you as well. Thanks so much for joining. If you are not on the YouTube side of things, go to the YouTube side of things and you will be able to participate in the chat. There's going to be, I think, more discussion tonight, maybe than we've had in prior episodes. I have to say, last week's episode was absolutely bonkers to me. I had been talking about this whole is bicycle touring in some kind of a decline for a while, pretty much all year, maybe even into last year, but I hadn't done an episode on it. And when I did this episode, you all came out of the woodwork. I have never had an episode have this many comments, this many emails. It's really interesting, and I think it's because we're all invested in it, and we all, I think, have a take on it, and there does seem to be some kind of consensus on that. And so on tonight's episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in some detail, sharing basically the flood of info that I've gotten from all of you as a part of all of that. But tonight, Thanksgiving Eve, it's special. If you are joining us from outside of the United States of America, it is a very, 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 very special night. And that is because it is when you come home from college, especially your freshman year, and you go to your hometown and you go to a bar, because usually maybe there's a bar that'll let you in at that age, and you end up having some fun times with your friends. And it is it's been a few months since you've seen them, and it's just really great. And it is also a great way to get away from family, if that's your thing, if that's what your needs are. And the bars are usually packed, and it's awesome. So I thought I would kind of utilize that as the method to the madness of this live show. So if you have not been to one of our live shows before, It's basically doing everything that I always say you don't do in podcasting, and that is showing your work and showing how the sausage gets made. It's a terrible, terrible thing because you normally don't have to see all of this kind of stuff, all of the fiddling with buttons and things along those lines. But tonight, the live shows, you do a little bit, as I do this little bit of a preamble as we start getting into things. I will be doing the intro. You may have noticed that the intro is a little different now. I actually now do a canned intro. I no longer read the intro exactly the same for every episode. I have a canned intro. So my intro, when I do any new episode, it just starts. And tonight will be just like that. So it'll be the first for the live show and all of that. Alrighty. So I think that that's basically where we're at. We have got, I do not know how to pronounce your name, underscore G underscore IV, or is it 4? I don't know. Howdy do to you as well. Checking in. G4. Okay, gotcha. And I shouldn't say where Miraculous Silver Slipper lives. So that's my bad. And a happy Thanksgiving to everyone, whether you are in the US and you're celebrating it or you're around the world. Happy Thanksgiving. You missed the Pedalshift Society. Stay tuned. 2026 is going to have some more stuff, I think, for the Pedalshift Society. I did take down the end of episode credits because I think that they were starting to not serve the same method to the madness that they used to. But I could have my mind changed. All you Pedalshift Society folks, and also once again a big g'day from I believe that's got to be Byron. Byron, if you've changed your username, it's new to me. G'day to you, and I will never do your accent ever again. That was my bad. And let's see. All right. So we are going to go into Brian Bechtel, another friend of the show. Good to see you all here. And we're starting to load up the room. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive right into the episode. I will do the read of the intro, and I have to remind myself because now it's all different. Yeah, I just go into it. So what we're going to do is a little bit of room tone. If you're a veteran of the live show, you know how it all goes. And then we'll go from there. I've been recording the audio this entire time. And all right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 423rd edition of the Pedalshift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. We are live, baby, live here in the chat room. We've got all sorts of folks in here. Allison, hello. We got you. Hello, everyone. If you are listening to this show, it is the day after, if you're listening to it upon release. And we did the live show on Thanksgiving Eve. If you are here live, I don't have to tell you that because you are here live. If you'd like to see the video version of it, go over to the YouTube channel and it is all there. On tonight's episode is Thanksgiving Eve in the United States, a very, very wonderful, wonderful night where usually a lot of drinking happens. And I am going to be drinking bubbly water because that is what I've got with me. A follow-up on bicycle touring possibly being in decline, on the wane, as it were. I mentioned this before we started recording the podcast portion to the live room, but I have never had more comments, more emails, more thoughtfulness coming from listeners ever in the history of this podcast. Last episode was absolutely remarkable, and I thought that I would spend a bunch of time here talking about your thoughts on the issue of whether or not bicycle touring is on the wane. It also, of course, includes some commentary on the Adventure Cycling Association, the ACA, and their challenges that they are going through here at the end of 2025 and going into 2026. I do not know what the vote ended up being. In fact, I presume maybe they haven't announced it yet about the sale of the building. I know that was the crux of what really got me to do the episode, the discussion on all of that. Lots of thoughts from you on the ACA and its place in bicycle adventuring. And, I want to say at the outset, and I hope it was underscored in the episode that came out last week, how much I respect the Adventure Cycling Association. I think that they do amazing work, and they've been around for 50 years, just about 50 years. They're closing in on that. And that is a remarkable achievement for such a niche thing. And so I think that what I was hearing from a lot of folks matches what my energy is on this. And that is, to the extent that ACA is falling short of what it would like to be, we're all rooting for it. And I think that that's a big piece about trying to see if this thing that we enjoy has a future. And I think that the answer is, it's a mixed bag. It's a niche thing. It's going through some evolution, and I think that the ACA is trying to match that. And so, lots and lots of comments from all of you out there on this topic. As I said, I mean, I've never gotten more emails and comments on a podcast or a video that I've ever done. So I'm just going to kind of go out and read a bunch of them here for you on the live show here. And I'd encourage you all who are here as well, especially if you did not submit an email or maybe even if you did, chime in with some of your thoughts as well, because I thought some of this goes beyond what I talked about, was really additive, very yes and elements to all of this. So I'm going to start off by going in on the Adventure Cycling Association, because there were a lot of listeners who had thoughts on the ACA. Multiple listeners, I'm kind of jamming a bunch of them together, saying, asking the question or posing the question, could the ACA be losing older members in its attempt to find younger members, but may not be succeeding on either front? It's hard to do both, because you have to be able to cater to the interests of a wider universe of people. And finding what drives certain constituencies sometimes may be a swing and a miss for others. And I'm going to give one particular quote from Bounce Back Westerner here on YouTube. And they said, I subscribed to the ACA magazine for 1 year. I was happy with one edition, but then it seemed like there was a trend to rides that were extremely challenging and demanding, whether that be on road or off road. These folks predominantly seemed younger, and maybe that's where most of the subscriptions came from. I thought that was a really fascinating thing, because I don't think that younger folks are into magazines as much, and that might be why the magazine has been shelved. But the interesting thing is that we could speculate that the ACA was saying, hey, we want to go towards more younger demographics, and younger demographics are doing the more challenging and demanding types of routes. And what did that end up doing? At least for Bounce Back Westerner, that ended up working against them. And so they ended up leaving the ACA, or at least didn't subscribe to the magazine beyond that 1 year. Another point, the ACA was built on a need which might not exist anymore. This was a really common thing. Before, they were the best and maybe the only resource for routes and maps that had been vetted, and vetted in a very professional way, I might add. Now, there are just way more resources. And that was a common thing that we heard. Listener Harry Hellerman said, was a great example of someone who's let his ACA membership lapse after 20 years. And what was his reason? Kind of what ACA was saying all along. He says that he's aging out, and the roads are now occupied by larger and larger vehicles, so there's a safety concern. That point right there, I heard a lot from people. I think that there is a lot to be said about the difficulty for people cycling on roads that are shared with motor vehicles. And I get that. I have had an incredibly charmed bicycle touring life, bicycle adventuring life. And I think that a lot of folks have it. And I particularly think that this has become more acute amongst younger generations as well, that they just don't want to square the circle. They don't want to bike in and amongst traffic when they've got other options. And that's the other thing, is that, this is saying that you've got options that are different than bicycle touring. And I'll use touring in particular here, because I think that's the one that seems to be the most ebbing here. Speaking of that, there were tons of comments on touring being down overall. So this is separate and apart from the ACA. Multiple listeners. Travel is down across the board, but travel to the US in particular has taken a huge hit. There's a ton of factors involved there, but you can't ignore the current politics as a possible reason to all that. And I don't get into politics on this show very much, if at all. Policy, yes. Politics, no. But I just heard today that I think travel from Canada is down over 20%. I think travel from Europe is also down a lot. The perception is that they are not welcome here in the US. And that absolutely is having some kind of an impact on bicycle touring because a lot of bicycle tourists are coming from outside of the US. At least that's been my experience here. What's the solution to that? I don't know, but that's certainly something that was mentioned. So whether it is true or not, there's a perception that it's true, and that could drive things. Listener Andrew Piper. Andrew had a couple of things that I'm just going to straight up read here. First one is a data point. I'm a data guy, so I really like this. Data point. For a 2-year comparison, the overall demand for search terms around bicycle touring is in fact down 25 to 35% year over year. I'm going to read that one more time. The search terms around bike touring is down 25 to 35% year over year. That is a measurable amount. He continues. However, using the same comparison, the demand for terms around bike packing is up around 40%, which does lend itself to the change in nomenclature more than an actual decline in interest. And I thought that that was a really, really interesting point, utilizing data as a part of it. It also gets into the thing that I was talking about before is, whereas before I would have said bike packing was underneath an umbrella term of bicycle touring, that may be flipping around, that bike packing now may be the dominant phrase or the dominant term for going out and doing bicycle travel that may or may not involve camping, but certainly will involve some long distance travel and some adventuring. I thought that was really good. He continues. He's got another thing that I'd like to read. I think I am maybe a couple years younger than yourself at best. Of the people I have seen doing this, I always feel I am on the younger side of the sport. Logistically, it makes sense. Who has time to do this? Older people. That really resonated with me because I have felt for a long time that I was in a weird spot, that I was kind of in the middle. I did not belong to the predominantly older folks that were out on the trails and on the roads. And I definitely didn't belong to the younger folks, the 20 somethings that were out there at the time. But what have I noticed as the years have gone on? I've seen a lot of the younger demographic just falling off with a couple of exceptions. And they're almost always doing some kind of like hardcore backcountry adventuring. And I just happen to be running into them in a particular campground. The older folks are starting to age out. And so what's left? Me. It's me. I'm the problem. I'm the graybeard, right? So I thought that was really, really interesting. Things have changed, and it lends credence to the thought process that there is a generation that's aging out of this stuff. I also loved this, and I even underscored it, so I must have really liked it. Bicycling for older generations was a big part of freedom. It might not be that for younger generations. That resonated with me probably most of all. When I was a kid, a bicycle meant freedom. It meant that I didn't have to stay within walking distance. I didn't have to go hang out with Chris next door over on Harvest Road. I didn't have to do that. I could hop on my bike and I could go to the Erie Canal towpath, or I could ride just to the other side of the big circular road that we were on that was about a mile around, or I could just ride around in circles on that. But it allowed me to broaden where I could go to. That was freedom that I don't think that you can capture for kids these days, if I may use that turn of phrase. And if we're not seeing kids that are going out on bikes like a Gen X kid or a millennial kid did, that doesn't transfer very well to bicycle adventuring, particularly bike touring. This really was the thing that made bike touring speak to me as much as it did. And I wonder if that is a real key point, that because we don't see cycling as a ticket to adventure in the same way for younger generations, that may be the thing that's the limiting factor here. And why would it be? You think about it. Just having the internet, having a phone, having the ability to go into chat rooms, to make your own videos, to have a podcast of your own as a kid, that's the kind of stuff that's the real adventuring these days. And I think that we're not seeing as much about hopping on a bike and going off and, making ramps and all the other things that you see on the Gen X forums that are out there. That may be one of the things, if we want to get really reductive, could be one of the reasons why we are seeing a drop off and an age out possibly. Okay, I want to read from listener G4. G4, you're in the house, I believe. So I'm going to be reading a bunch of your stuff here. Really thoughtful email from the perspective of somebody who's a little bit younger than me, maybe in the 10 years, a solid millennial age range, I think. Shorter touring is definitely more of a thing, is what G4 was talking about. And some of the places where the routes go don't feel welcoming for a whole bunch of people. This gets back a little bit to the politics kind of thing. There's political ramifications, there's demographic ramifications for all of that. That's a thing for people. And that makes a big difference. For younger generations, there's a real shift to urbanism. And urbanism being like, you like cities way more, and going out into the small towns and the rural blue highways of Americana, that just doesn't resonate as much. You may have to go all the way into kind of getting out into wildernessy things, and then maybe things pick up. But I thought that was a really insightful thing. Talked about poor infrastructure and safety concerns. This is another theme that we're seeing a lot as well. Perception time here, and this gets to a thing about the ACA, that there's a perception that the ACA represents an older version of bicycle travel, those longer trips. Advocacy for more trails and trail amenities. I'm sorry, let me go back. This is a quote, so let me quote this in full here. Quote, I think what the next generation wants is not roadmaps, but trail maps and advocacy for more trails and trail amenities. And I might note, probably videos, how-tos, explainers, and meetups, not print versions of easily Googleable information. That I thought was really insightful. That's a kind of thing where it's sort of like, what is it? Where do you have to go to meet the needs and desires of younger folks who are interested in this kind of stuff? And the idea here is that for a lot of them, for a lot of people, what has served us in the past doesn't serve them in the moment. And that's something that the ACA I know is working on, but that's their big challenge here, is figuring it out, cracking that code. Here's a longer quote, and this was the one that I thought was really, really awesome. It's clear from the overabundance of urbanist youth getting around by transit, bicycles, or even scooters that travel by, or even scooters, that travel by bicycle isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But turning them into bicycle tours involves developing routes and programs that are closer to cities and further from cars, marketing dedicated bicycle trails as one piece of an integrated solution for transit and bicycle accessible nature, specifically focusing on routes with many transit junctions to allow long routes to be chewed into smaller chunks, helping the rapidly growing contingent of bicycle commuters to learn how to use their bicycles beyond weekdays to short or long weekends, with week-long or more tours being an eventual end goal, but not the primary purpose. And politically advocating for car displacing trains, trails, and cycle tracks that make all of this possible. I thought that was really insightful. And I've used the term urbanism a lot. City Nerd is a popular channel here on YouTube. If you want to learn more about urbanism, I would definitely invite you to take a look at it. But I think that this is clear that there is a shift. It's not universal. I mean, I'm sure that there are, we can find folks who would disagree within these generational cohorts that we're talking about here. But there's definitely a trend line, and there's definitely a trend that I see amongst folks that are like Dr. G4. And one other thing that he raises, and a lot of other people talked about this, Rails to Trails Conservancy may have the better model at this point for meeting this need. And why is that? Their advocacy fits exactly the kind of stuff that G4 was talking about. So that's the kind of thing that those are a lot of your thoughts, basically. And so I want to open it up here for folks as well. I'm seeing some comments in here, and let's see. We got Scott. That's true. Growing up, almost every kid had a bike, but now hardly any of them ride bikes like we used to. I think that was the piece that really resonated with me, and the piece where I was like, that is starting to make sense as to the why we're not seeing things resonate. Is it the only answer? No. Are there kids out there that are riding their bikes like I used to? Sure, absolutely. But again, there's trend lines. I think that's a really important thing as well. Let's see what we got here. Brian, bike to work commuting is on the decline also. I think that depends on where you're at. If you go, there are ways that you can get the data on this. And in many cities, bike to work commuting is actually on the increase. And where does that end up happening? In a place like Washington, D.C., which has invested over the last 10 years massively on good, or well, maybe not good, better than nothing infrastructure. Then you're starting to see places like Seattle where we're starting to see more densification happening as well. And so we are seeing a lot more bike commuting there. It's that bike transit kind of combination that I think is something that might be a solution. And that gets into what 4G was talking about as well. Let's see, what else do we got here? Byron from Down Under. Most of our rides come from a couple of blogs or ride with GPS maps. Rail trails are our closest body to the ACA Down Under. And that's a really good point. Everything I've been talking about has been very American centric. And I know that different countries have different responses to all of this. My perception is that in Europe, maybe the decline isn't as noticeable, but I'm not so sure about that because I don't ride in Europe very frequently. I tend to be in cities when I'm in Europe, and I have not done a full European ride. I need to fix that at some point. But I do have to wonder if this decline that I think all of us are experiencing here in the U.S. and perhaps in North America as well. I imagine that Canada has got the same situation as well. Whether or not that's happening globally too, open question. And that's one thing that I did not get in responses. It was a much more Americanized response. Well, in any event, I think that this was, from my perspective, a really helpful thing to hear from so many of you about all of this. And I think that this is a dialogue that needs to continue. But at the same time, also, it's sort of like we recognize that we're sort of a niche thing. And doing this isn't necessarily going to be anything that's going to take off to any great extent. And frankly, would we even want that? Do you want your secret campsite that you're so happy to get to every single time you're on the Pacific coast? Do you want that to be so jammed with people that you have a hard time setting up your tent? I know that a particular campsite near San Francisco is often really, really difficult to get your tent set up. And frankly, it's sometimes a little bit more of a drag than anything else. And Samuel P. Taylor, that's the name of the park. Is that the one in Oregon? Oh boy, I mix all of these up. They're named after long dead people. So I have no idea. I think it's Samuel P. Taylor. But in any event, yeah, do you really want this cool thing that's kind of all to yourself? Do you really want this thing to kind of take off or not? I know that I've been advocating for more people to do this kind of stuff, but broadly, do it in a way that kind of makes sense for you. I always say, ride your ride. If that means that it's panniers and pavement, awesome, do it. It's been done for a really long time and probably will be done for a long time after this discussion. But this evolution that we're seeing, I think, is something that we should be embracing. And I think that's where we circle back to the ACA and know that they're facing a bit of a challenge here. And their ability to be able to meet that challenge is going to determine whether or not they're going to be able to continue doing what they've done for the last 50 years. And I know I'm rooting for them for sure. We've got a comment here. In Europe, you can just ride a half an hour from your house and be on some sort of trail that will crisscross the country or other countries. We do not have that here in the US. Yeah, the Eurovelo routes that are available are absolutely fantastic. I would say that, again, to kind of hype up the ACA a little bit and the Rails to Trails Conservancy, we do have a great network of trails. We're just a lot bigger. I think most European countries are smaller. And so, the ability to kind of get to some trail is perhaps a little bit easier. We're also a very car-centric country by design. And I know that a lot of folks are trying to change that. I know that when you get into the urbanism stuff that I've been mentioning before, there's a lot of folks that would really like to change that, particularly in dense city centers. And, there's politics behind all of that and policy behind all of that. And I know a lot of folks are engaged in that type of a thing. I know Rails to Trails is, I know ACA is to a certain extent, but I think that they're wanting to do more. And I think that's going to resonate too for some folks that maybe are looking for that in a membership model for something that they want to belong to. I think that there's a lot of open questions left. I don't think there are easy answers. I spent the better part now of 2 separate podcasts talking about it. And so to be continued is basically what I would say to all of that. All right, we're going to take a quick pause here. That was segment 1. Congratulations, you made it. Thank you all for your thoughtfulness throughout all of this. I'm going to take a sip because I've been talking for so much. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little ask me anything in the next segment. And so if you've got any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. The rules are folks in the live room get to be front of the line, and folks that are not are towards the back. The other thing that I'm going to say is I have a list of 25 separate questions. And so what I'm going to do is when I run out of questions, I'm going to ask for someone in the room to give me a random number between 1 and 25, and that will determine the question that we've got. These are developed, these are pulled from a variety of different sources of people asking me questions through the years. It includes mostly bicycle travel stuff, but it does include, do I have any pop culture questions in there? I do. I have a few pop culture questions that slid in there as I am wont to do. Okay. All right, everybody. It is now time for the patented live show. Ask me anything. General rules are folks in the live chat get to go first. I do not see any live chat questions at this point, which means that I'm going to need a random number from someone in the live room because I've got a whole bunch of questions that are all set up. Number from 1 to 25. First one to put it in the chat box. That's the one I'm going to do. I need to have some kind of music here. Oh, actually, I could do that. Do I have music? Who needs music? Scott gives me number 13. Lucky number 13. Number 13 is, what are your thoughts on e-bikes for touring, and when do you think they're a good option? Okay. E-bikes. Well, you could tell this question came a little bit longer ago. I was really, as you all know, deeply into the e-bike thing at the end of last year and going into the spring of this year. And then I had this whole grand plan to get out there and do the circumnav of Lake Ontario in a way that I could only do with an e-bike or, as it turns out, a vehicle. And it didn't work out because reasons. You can go back and listen to the past episodes of the pod for that. I'm still pretty committed to the idea of e-bikes for touring. I think that the challenge, as always, is making sure that the bike works for you first. I think just slapping on a motor and having a couple of big batteries like I have was a huge first step. And I really like the bike that I built. It's not as comfortable as I would like it to be. And I think I mentioned this on a past episode when I talked about the touring goals. But I think I need to dial that in a little bit more for me. When that happens, I'm going to be I'm going to be like Biking Brian and I think he's in the midst or is soon to finish up his a series over on his YouTube channel, and he just does some great stuff with his e-bike rides and really was kind of honestly gave me the FOMO for getting into e-bike touring because I really like the idea of twice as far, twice as fast kind of a thing for half the effort. That's really exciting to me, and I'm really looking forward to utilizing that somehow in 2026. I don't know what it's going to look like at this point for me, but I am a big fan of it. I'm really looking forward to doing something bold like the Lake Ontario transnavigation, the circling Lake Ontario, doing something like that with an e-bike. I do think that the mistake that I made in that trip was not researching the ferries. That was an important one. But I think that it's important to level up in a little bit more thoughtful way. I did shakedown ride. I did rides around here And then I did the shakedown ride. I did the C&O segment. I did all those other types of things. But what I think I really need to do is do something in between a C&O segment, a day long C&O segment, and a 6-day adventure around Lake Ontario with international borders and ferries and things like that. I think I need to kind of do something a little less ambitious as the first big one. And I hope to be able to do that sometime next year. So, all right. So next question we've got Robert is giving us, well, Dave reminds us, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving Eve here, and we're going to be answering some more questions. Byron comes in with a question because live chat people come first. And Byron asks, is there any bike technology you are eager to try but haven't yet? Suspension saddle, a different wheel size, a particular Shimano group set, which I am not aware of at all. Great question. I would say, I don't think there's anything that I'm really jazzed about beyond dialing in this e-bike thing at this point. Suspension saddle is actually kind of interesting. I bought a new saddle for the e-bike that is not a Brooks saddle, but similar to, it's a leather saddle that has the springs in them. The suspension saddles are interesting. In addition to the bike breaking 14 different ways, Mysterious James's bike from Oregon this year had what appeared to be some kind of a suspension saddle in it, and it seemed a little fiddly. And I think that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in trying one of them out, but I think that with so many different things around bicycling, something that's sometimes a little bit more complex than what we're used to has a better chance of breaking. And if it breaks in its more advanced fiddly form, it is harder to deal with when you're out in the roads and the trails and things like that. A suspension saddle probably isn't that big of a deal. And I saw one particular suspension saddle, and it was on a bike that was just cursed. So I'm not going to use that as a commentary on all suspension saddles. Different wheel sizes. I don't know, man. I got the little clown bike. The Brompton is enough of a wheel size change for me. I did have a 26-inch bike with the Goblin, but that's now my trainer. So I don't know if the Goblin's going to come out of retirement there. The 700C tires work real well for me. I will say that there may come a time that I may try out a nice, fast, skinny tire bike at some point. One of the things that, when I was talking about the ultralight challenge, that seemed really, really exciting was the prospect of getting on something that's a little bit faster, a little bit more nimble, because I'm not carrying nearly as much stuff. I go back to the guy, I always reference this guy out on the West Coast years and years ago, the viola player from Titanic. That dude absolutely rocked a skinny tired bike, and it was awesome. And he had a little bag on the front of it, and that was it. I still don't know how I got away with that, but it was awesome. And that's the kind of stuff that I think would be really interesting to try out down the road. I just need more space for bikes, depending on all sorts of different factors, but that's for another time. Brian asks, in your opinion, when did cycle touring peak in popularity? What year? That's a really good question. So as a student of history, that sounds really terrible to say. I would say, okay, well, let's start off by saying that cycle touring, I think we're going to go with the panniers and pavement style of bike adventuring. We'll use that. It has existed for a really, really long time. You could argue it's been around since the safety bike in the early 20th century. People were traveling and camping and brought bedrolls and stuff like that. So it has existed for the better part of 100 years. And so I think it's had a bunch of different ebbs and flows. I think for the most part, you cannot ignore the bike centennial in the US in 1976 as a massive bump in popularity. And that probably lasted for a solid 5, 6, 7 years into the early 80s for sure. And why do we know that? Because we see lots of pictures of people in late 70s, early 80s garb and a lot of the historical pictures that we've got. I think I did an episode way, way back when. It might have been a round number anniversary for Bike Centennial that got into all of that. And there was a great picture of people in really itty bitty short shorts, the dudes I'm talking here, of the fashion of the day, and, long hair and everything like that, beards, they look like backup singers for ABBA. It was a look, it was a thing, it was a vibe. The 70s were weird, as I always like to say. So I think that was probably one of the potential peaks. I think that there was another one that was happening maybe around the time when the very I struggle with this a little bit because I only can go by what I saw when I first started getting into this in the early 2010s, the late aughts, as it were, and the early 2010s. I think that there might have been a little bit of a burst then as well. And why? Because I think we saw a lot of media jump out of it. This Dopey podcast being just one of them, but there were a lot of things and I think it was more so because of the nature of social media and YouTube and other things that were starting their rise around then. I think that was another place that we've got right there. So I would say somewhere in those places. But I can't ignore that kind of mid 70s to early 80s thing. I think that might have been its high point, but then you just never know. There's been a lot of investment. State of Oregon has done a lot of investment, for instance, and so they have data on this, and I would love to see that data at some point. So if anybody's got an in on that, I would love that. G4, major contributor to this episode. Thank you for your thoughtfulness on all this. What is the biggest and best bike trail that hasn't been built yet besides GART, the Great American Rail Trail, for those of you not in the know? Why should that be built first, and how would you advocate for it? I have not looked at the Great American Rail Trail in a minute. I did earlier this year, so I am not aware of kind of the missing pieces here. But I think that's really the thing that I would advocate for the most, is filling in the missing pieces of a larger infrastructure. And the reason why I say that is just a few miles away from here, we've got the C&O. The C&O leads to the Gap, the Great Allegheny Passage. Great Allegheny Passage was a series of teeny tiny local trails, some of them just a few miles long, forever and ever and ever. And then someone had the great idea, hey, what if we connect these together? And at the grand scale, the Great American Rail Trail is precisely that. It's saying, let's do that just with the whole country. And so my answer to you would be to find the places where we've got the most population, the most interest, and the most missing pieces connected to large infrastructure that's in place. So that could be a way to connect cities, something that you had advocated for. I think is a brilliant idea. I think that we want to do this in places where it will serve a greater use than just recreational use. Places where we might be able to get some additional commuting opportunities as a result of all of that. I think these multi-purpose trails can have just a great, great impact on all sorts of aspects of livability. And so I guess I'm kind of copping out on your question. I think that it's really the Great American Rail Trail, but done in the places where it will have the most impact now. And you start to build out on that. And I think that you see that in cities that have focused in on transit and expanding on that. They don't just usually build their light rail systems, for instance, all right away. They build it in segments, and they focus in on the places where you can have the easiest places to build, the most impactful places, and they have a method to the madness with all of that. And that's what I would say with that. I would really like to see places connected a little bit more. I know, I'm going to forget the name of the trail. In Washington State, there is a trail that is really, really well developed west of the Cascades. I think it's the is it the John Wayne? No, John Wayne's in Nebraska. Oh, somebody will remind me of it. But it is frequently disconnected at times, and it goes all the way across the entire state. I would love to see that trail invested in. I would love to see that trail fixed up because that would be pretty cool. And I think then you start seeing some connectivity between Western Washington and Eastern Washington. And I think that would be really fascinating to see. So bit of a cop out, but I would say you want to focus in on the ones that make the most sense. That's what I would say. Scott asks, we last rode the C&O in 2017 and we're planning another trip in 2026. Very cool. How much has the surface changed and is it really that much better? I just remember getting beat half to death in 2017. Let me tell you, when I first started this podcast, I was more of an advocate for leaving the historical surface alone for the C&O. And I was wrong. And here's why. I thought that preserving the historic nature of the towpath was an important element to it as a National Historic Park. And I think the reality is that it wasn't really the historic towpath surface. It was a modern take on just throwing down some limestone grit or whatever the heck it was and calling that a historic surface. And the reality is no, it wasn't catering to the historic nature of the towpath. The historic nature of the towpath is maintaining it for current use so that people who go on bike rides in 2017 and beyond don't end up having a beat half to death. We'll put that back up again. A beat half to death moment. And so I was wrong. And I would like to say that what they have done with the new surface leans into better technology around drainage, around surviving some of these semi-frequent floods that the Potomac is going to pitch at it. And it has made a really big difference. Where there has been new surfacing, and they've been continuing to put more surface down over longer portions of it, it is fabulous. And it has fixed, and I mean fixed, some of the worst stretches of the trail. Does that mean that there aren't any bad stretches anymore? No, there are still a couple of them, but they are working on it. And I think that that is going to end up meaning a whole bunch of great things. Number one, all this talk about bicycle touring being on the wane, I'm telling you, it's not the case on the C&O. People come from all over the world, all over the country, all over North America to ride it. And a lot of them love it. A lot of them love the parts that have been restored or that have been upgraded. A lot of them hate the older surface and everybody in between. As I always say, I love that trail. It is in my backyard, not literally, but kind of figuratively. And it is, it loves to hate you. And it's loving to hate you a lot less lately. And so I think you're going to have a much better time, weather permitting. We will end up seeing about that. Let's see. Dave says, the Empire Trail is the same idea. Pre-existing trails connected into a longer one. This goes back to the comment before that G4 had asked about. Yeah, there are pre-existing local trails. If there are rights of way that can be purchased to connect these things together and you can get a longer and longer trail, I just think that that creates more room for adventure and exploring. I think that that's really good. G4 gets to come back in line again. What's the biggest missing piece of non-bike touring infrastructure? I understood that actually. That would help increase bicycle touring, transit to and along trails, bike training course in school, etc. I don't know about bike training courses. I mean, all I know is that there's a lot of things I wish they would teach in schools that are different than what they do right now. But sure, bicycle, throw it in the mix. I think transit that serves bikes is probably the best thing. And what does that do? It means that you don't have to do an out and back. It means that you can do it all in one day. It means that you've got a bailout point if you need to. I think having rail, bus, some form of way of getting to and or from any of these places that you can bike around is a really, really important thing. I think about the trip that I've been contemplating for a really long time, and that is getting a bike to New York City and circumnavigating Manhattan. I've thought about doing that for a really, really long time. The beauty of that is if at any point I run into a cursed bike like MJ's bike situation, or I just think it's a terrible idea and I decided to do it in the summer like a dope and it's too hot and I'm done with it, or whatever. Whatever happened, there's a bus, there's a subway, there's all sorts of different things that can take me from wherever I'm at in Manhattan to wherever I want to go, and I can put the bike in on that. That's the kind of thing that I'd like to see more at scale for these types of regional routes. I am going to use the C&O and the Gap as an example here. There are a limited number of places where you've got spots where you can jump off. And that's because the only thing that serves those trails really in any way is Amtrak, asterisk, closer into DC, you've got MARC, the Maryland Regional Heavy Rail, commuter rail. But basically, between DC and Harper's Ferry, there's limited spots that you can jump off. There's a few. There's Brunswick, which is so close to Harper's Ferry that it shouldn't even count. And then between Harper's Ferry and Cumberland, that's a 2-day ride, unless you're a superhero and do extra miles than I do. And then from there, it's another at least a day and a half ride to the next place. So, I mean, it's just, I would love to see better connectivity. I would love to see multiple in and out points that are possible. It's one of the reasons why I expanded some of my adventures, particularly on the pavement side of things, to places where I knew I could kind of get fast forwards if I wanted to. That's why the Oregon coast, I think, is so fantastic with their bus system. And again, it's cobbled together. It's not one giant bus system. It's a all county-based bus systems. But I that's the type of thing that I would say about that. Some more stuff here. Rail trails are better than towpath trails because abandoned rail infrastructure isn't a mosquito breeding ground. Discuss. Well, I think that, okay, anytime there are mosquitoes, that's bad. I mean, just straight up. One of the reasons why I haven't done any Alaska adventures is because I understand that the mosquito is the state bird, and I am super not interested in dealing with all of that. I think that you will find that there's a lot of rail infrastructure that is mosquito-y, and perhaps just as much as next to the C&O abandoned canal. So that's a possibility. I think it all just really depends. It depends on where you're at, but I like your moxie. Byron, speaking of infrastructure, train connections to trails has been great for my state in Australia. $10 can get you 300 kilometers. Can you tell that I do not speak in metric? 300 kilometers plus from the city. The 6 bike limit is frustrating. That's another thing right there. A lot of the trains have a limited amount of ability to take bikes. If you are in a place with advanced that are a little more advanced on the urbanism thing, you'll find that they will have a certain amount of bike racks, but there is no limit on the number of bikes that can fit in the train. If it's really crowded in rush hour, sort of social cues say wait till the next train, so you're not leaving people out for your bike. But I believe BART in San Francisco, I believe the Link in Seattle, but I'm less sure on that. And I'm pretty sure the Max in Portland all allow you. I mean, there's no limit on the number of bikes. I would want to, someone fact check me on that if I'm incorrect, but I do know that there are places where you don't run into a max number of bikes. You look at something in the US like Amtrak, and there's a limit on the number of bikes that you can go from DC to Cumberland or vice versa to beginner and your C&O adventure. And that is a limiting factor on the ability for bikes and trains to work. And those are the logical beginning and end points for the C&O. It is a great place to go for starting the Gap as well. So I'd like to see a little bit better management of that. If Amtrak, for instance, is finding that those bike reservations fill up all the time, figure out a way to add more bikes into the system. That's what I would end up saying with all of that. So let's see here. Have I gotten all of the questions? Yes. Yes, I've gotten all the questions in here. So I'm going to need another number. Somebody gave me a number before. It was number 1, which we have already done in a past podcast. So I think the next one was number 17. Thank you, Dave. Any advice for touring internationally? Oh, yeah. Ask me about this, right? How do you manage logistics like visas and transport? This was a question that should have come up when Mysterious James was on the show last year. I would say this. For international stuff, I have thought about it a lot. And of course, I was prepared for this with my trip to Canada. And the big thing is you want your passport. And I just happen to have my brand new one here. Brand new one, you ask. Tim, why do you have a brand new passport? Because I lost it. I lost my passport and I needed it for an upcoming adventure that I'm going on, which will become clearer later. But the number one thing is making sure, I think, that you've got your logistics handled from a travel perspective, getting to and from your international point of call, right? Okay. So that means you've got to have your air or your rail transport figured out. That includes your bike. And then you got to make sure you've got all of your passports in hand. I lost my passport, as I said, and so I now have this is a nice passport case. Oh wait, you'll notice there's an air tag attached to my passport now. That is because I'm never going to lose a passport ever again, ever. I'm just not, and so that's my excitement for having a passport that I can't lose anymore. Oh, this is good. Hold on, Byron. Breaking news: Tim is coming to Australia this winter. Not real news. Fake news, as they would say. Look, Byron, one of these days I'm going to darken your door, or at least come to the state that you're in Australia, because Australia has long been a place that I've wanted to go to. So stay tuned. Perhaps next year, perhaps later. I don't know, but I'm coming to Australia. It's not. The term bucket list is not one of my favorite terms, but I like the concept of, hey, there's things I want to do. That's one of the things I would like to do. Okay, so I think that's kind of my big thing is understand logistics, understand how you're going to handle the language barrier should there be one. That's honestly one of the limiting factors for me. But now I have a set of AirPods that apparently can translate Spanish on the fly. So that's exciting. It won't allow me to speak Spanish, but it'll allow me to understand it, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I would say handling all of those other types of logistics. Understand going into another country, its cultures, its differences between what you're used to, so that you can be a good ambassador for wherever you're from when you go to that place. I think that's incredibly important. Something that I learned at a really young age. I used to live in Japan when I was a teenager, and it was super important in framing who I am right now. To as a white dude who lived amongst a lot of white people in Western New York, to go to a place where I was a minority for a little while at an age where it was kind of an impressionable thing on me. And I learned a lot about that. And I learned a lot about cultural differences, and I learned a lot about respecting those cultural differences too. So yeah, that's what I would say. All of those things when it comes to international travel. But I also would say, don't be a scaredy cat like me. Get out there and do it. And go do it. I need to. The limiting factor thing is a limiting factor, right? Right? Time is a limiting factor. Location is a limiting factor. So eventually I'm going to get to all these things. So, all right, what do we got here? G4. G4, you're the star. You're the unsung. You're the co-host of this episode. What is the best EU country to live in for train-based long-distance bike trail touring? Ideally, currently accepting postdocs for American refugee scientists. Asking for a friend. I do wonder if that friend might be you. It might be you. I don't know the answer to that. I do know I loved Ireland, but I'm not sure if that would necessarily hit all of the marks for you there. Ireland really speaks to me in a lot of different ways. Language barrier obviously is not a thing, although idioms and accents are always a thing, particularly mine to them. So I think that's that. All right, let's see. I got a request for number 23. Are there? Oh, we get a pop culture question, a random pop culture question, and I think this is going to end up closing things out because we're getting close to the top of the hour here. Number 23, are there any 80s or 90s bands you'd want to create the soundtrack for a bike adventure film? Okay. Okay, this is a tough one. This is really, really important. It's important that we get this right. Now, number one, for those of you who are on the live stream, you can see on the video that I've got an album cover over here. I'm going to grab it. Oh, there's two. Okay, two in a row. All right. Here's my 80s and 90s musts to have. Number one, we're going to go with what was facing out. This is a shout out to Brock Dittus, formerly of the Sprocket Podcast. This is the In Excess album, the great In Excess album. Welcome to Wherever You Are. I would say on this one, I think that you're looking at Not Enough Time. Not Enough Time, I think, belongs on that particular soundtrack album. It is one of the great songs on, in my opinion, their greatest album, which is a hot take, except amongst In Excess fans. Number two, let me tell you, Desert Island top albums of all time. If I only could take one, it is incredibly possible that this would be my choice. It's a tough call, but Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. There's your 80s entry here. I'm telling you, the bangers, absolute bangers. This was recorded in 1984, arguably the greatest year in music. It was released in 1985. And boy, let's see, for a bicycle touring situation, do we go for a deeper cut? I don't think so. I think we're going to go for a deeper cut. Everybody Wants to Rule the World is the obvious choice, right? But I'm going to go for a slightly deeper cut. The Working Hour. The Working Hour is a really underrated song, but this album is full of bangers, all bangers here on Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. An excellent question. There are clearly other songs that would go on that. I'd be curious what you all think. Send them to me. Send them to me, and maybe I'll make a playlist on Apple Music or Spotify or something along those lines. Well, we are at the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody for participating in this episode. Extra special shout out to G4 for being effectively the co-host for this episode, and fantastic email, fantastic thoughts. Thank you in particular. All of you regulars out there, thank you so much for being a part of all of this. This will be the episode for tomorrow. So I have some work to do tonight. While all of you are dry brining your turkey, I'm going to be casting a pod, and it's going to be coming out at its usual time tomorrow morning, East Coast time. So if you want to revisit this with all the uhs and ums removed, yes, I do remove them, then please enjoy, you folks in the live room. And for the rest of you, well, you just heard this. Go listen to it again. Thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy evenings, and we will see you next time.